My name is Kelly Bryant. I'm 29 years old, and on my wedding day, I found my father standing in a narrow hallway with no seat while 9 members of my fiancé's family sat at the table that was supposed to be his. Table 1, front and center. That's where my parents belonged. Instead, someone had moved them to table 16, the last table in the room, pressed up against the kitchen doors and a trash station. And when I asked my husband-to-be why, I heard him say something about my father that shattered every excuse I had been making for the past 2 years. I stood there in my wedding dress, frozen in that hallway, while 200 guests waited just beyond the doors. And in that moment, I made a decision I can never take back. And I wouldn't, even if I could. What I did next, what he said, and what happened to his family afterward. That's the story I'm about to tell you. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you believe that family isn't about status or money. What truly matters is love and respect. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from? And what time is it there right now? This is a fictional story. Some elements have been enhanced with the help of AI to make it more vivid, but every emotion you'll hear, every reaction, every choice, is real. Now, let me walk you through what really happened. June 14th. The last morning I ever woke up as Ethan Caldwell's fiancé. Brookhaven, Illinois, population just under 9,000. The kind of place where the pharmacist remembers your birthday, and the cashier at the grocery store asks about your mom by name. I grew up on Maple Street, in a small 2-bedroom house my dad bought the year I was born. It took him 23 years to pay it off. He wrote the final check on my 17th birthday, then took us all out for milkshakes to celebrate. My dad, Thomas Bryant, worked as a plumber, 35 years. Same job, same worn-out steel toe boots resoled more times than I could count. His knees started giving out around year 20. His back followed not long after. But he never missed a single day of work while I was growing up. Not one. He'd come home every evening around 6, wash the grime off his hands with that gritty orange soap that smelled like citrus and gasoline, then sit at the kitchen table and ask me what I learned at school. Every single day. My mom, Carol Bryant, worked in the cafeteria at Brookhaven Elementary. She served lunch to hundreds of kids daily and somehow knew every single one of them by name. She knew who had allergies, who needed lactose-free milk, who pretended not to be hungry, but always came back for seconds. Those kids, she made sure they never left with an empty tray. We weren't rich. I slept in a room where the wall rattled every time the water heater kicked on. My winter coat in 8th grade used to belong to my cousin 3 years before me. But our house was always warm. Dinner was always on the table. And not once, not a single time, did my parents ever make me feel like I was lacking anything. I worked hard. Scholarships, student loans, late nights. I became a nurse practitioner at a small clinic off Route 17. And by 28, I had paid off every dollar of debt. I built that life myself. But the foundation that came from Thomas and Carol Bryant, I truly believed a family like mine was something anyone would be proud of. I was wrong. I met Ethan Caldwell on a Tuesday in October, 2 years before the wedding. His father, Gregory Caldwell, came into the clinic for a routine physical. Ethan drove him. He was leaning casually against the reception counter when I walked in, holding a patient chart. Tall, dark hair. Perfectly styled but somehow effortless. The kind of face that looked like it belonged on a billboard or in a corporate office downtown. He smiled at me, and I smiled back. We had dinner that Friday, then again the next week, then the week after that, and before I knew it, we had a rhythm. Every Friday night, every Sunday afternoon, every quiet moment in between. Ethan was charming in ways I hadn't experienced before. He opened doors without thinking about it, pulled out chairs like it was second nature. He took me to a French restaurant in Chicago, where the napkins felt heavier than my winter coat growing up. The Caldwells lived in a different world. Real estate developers, 3 generations deep. Their last name was on a residential subdivision, a shopping plaza, and a bronze plaque at the Lakeshore Country Club, where they'd been members for over 25 years. 5-bedroom house, 2 acres, private driveway. Gregory ran the company. Ethan handled acquisitions. And his mother, Victoria Caldwell, chaired the Bright Future Foundation Gala every year and sat on multiple nonprofit boards. The first time I met Victoria, she wore a cream silk dress and pearl earrings that caught the light every time she moved. She shook my hand, then looked me over slowly. A community clinic. She said, "How admirable." Then she added, almost lightly, "Ethan used to date Olivia Parker. Her father's the chief surgeon over at St. Andrew's." She smiled when she said it, but it wasn't warmth. It was comparison. I told myself that's just how people in her world spoke. Polished, distant, careful with words but heavy with meaning. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "She'll warm up." She didn't. But by then, I was already in love. And love has a way of turning red flags into things you explain instead of things you run from. Ethan proposed 14 months later at one of his family's restaurants. A private room, candlelight, a string quartet playing softly in the corner, and Victoria sitting just a few tables away. Total coincidence. Ethan said. I said yes anyway, because the ring on my finger didn't come from Victoria. It came from the man who drove 40 minutes in the rain to bring me soup when I had the flu. The man who texted me every morning. The man who told me my parents were good people, and that he couldn't wait to call my father Dad. Then the wedding planning began. And slowly, the version of Ethan I thought I knew started to shift. Victoria chose the venue. Not the small church on Maple Street where my parents got married, but the Lakeshore Country Club. She chose the wedding planner, her friend, Elise. She chose the menu, every course, every detail. And when my mom gently suggested adding her fried chicken as one of the appetizers, Victoria tilted her head and smiled. "That's sweet, Carol," she said. "But this is a formal dinner, not a potluck." My mom laughed like it didn't sting, but I saw her hands tighten in her lap. Every time I tried to push back, Ethan gave me the same answer. "Let her have this one, Kel. After the wedding, it's just us, our house, our rules." I wasn't weak. I want to be clear about that. I made a decision, a calculated one. Lose the small battles now, win the war later. The venue didn't matter. The menu didn't matter. What mattered was the marriage. The 40 years after the wedding. That was my logic, and it held together, right up until I realized those small battles weren't small at all. They were rehearsals. Victoria wasn't just planning a wedding. She was testing boundaries, seeing how much control she could take. And I kept giving it to her. I didn't understand it at the time, but the wedding day wasn't the beginning of anything. It was the final test. June 14th, 6 in the morning. I woke up in my old bedroom at my parents' house. Sunlight filtered softly through the curtains my mom had sewn when I was 12. My dress hung on the closet door. Ivory satin, floor length. Simple. I paid for it myself. Victoria had suggested a designer gown from a boutique in Chicago. I said no. That was the one thing I kept. That was the one thing I refused to let go of. By 10 that morning, I was already at Lakeshore Country Club. The place looked unreal, like something out of a magazine I could never afford growing up. White peonies arranged in crystal vases, ivory tablecloths pressed so perfectly they didn't have a single crease, Gold-rimmed chargers at every seat, hundreds of candles flickering in soft symmetry, a 12-piece string ensemble warming up out in the garden. $85,000 worth of venue, decor, and catering. Most of it paid for by the Caldwells. 200 guests were expected. Half of them were Ethan's people, business partners, country club members, the mayor's wife. The Reynolds family, the Harringtons, the other half, were mine. My Aunt Denise from Rockford, 3 nurses from the clinic, my college roommate, old neighbors from Maple Street, people who drove pickup trucks, people who wore dresses from department stores, people who didn't know what a charger plate was. I noticed the imbalance almost immediately. Ethan's side filled the front rows, the center tables, the spaces closest to the dance floor. My people were placed along the edges, near the walls, near the exits. Samantha, my maid of honor, my best friend since freshman orientation, leaned in during rehearsal and whispered, "Why are your relatives all the way in the back?" I gave a small shrug. Probably just numbers. Their side has more guests. She looked at me for a second longer than usual, like she didn't quite believe it, but she didn't say anything else. The ceremony started at noon. I walked down the aisle. Ethan was waiting at the end. He looked perfect. He always looked perfect. And maybe that was part of the problem. I spent so much time admiring the outside, I never stopped to question what was underneath. The ceremony itself went smoothly. Vows, rings, applause. From the outside, it was flawless. While the guests moved out to the terrace for cocktails, I slipped into the reception hall to check the setup one last time. Old habit. I'm a nurse. I double-check everything. The room was stunning. 20 round tables dressed in white and gold. Place cards set in small brass holders. Every detail exactly where it should be. Table 1 sat directly in front of the dance floor and the stage. The head table, 10 seats. That's where both families were supposed to sit. Ethan's parents, mine, his grandmother, my Aunt Denise. I walked over and picked up the first place card. Charles Caldwell, Ethan's uncle. Next one, Margaret Caldwell. Then another, Daniel Caldwell, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, Victoria Caldwell Ross, another Caldwell, another 9 seats filled with Ethan's family and their circle. I didn't see a single Bryant. My chest tightened. Slowly, I started checking the other tables. Table 2, more Caldwells. Table 3, country club members. Table 4, business associates. I kept going. Table 8, Table 10, Table 12. And then I found them. Table 16. The last table in the room, pressed up against the far wall, right beside the swinging kitchen doors. I could hear dishes clattering from the other side. The chairs didn't match the rest of the room. Instead of polished wood, they were padded folding chairs. The kind you bring out when you run out of everything else. The chairs were the kind you bring out when everything else runs out. A service cart stacked with dirty glasses sat just a couple of feet away. The light above the table was dimmer than the rest of the room. Not warm and golden like the chandeliers. Just a harsh utility bulb that made everything look dull. I looked down at the place cards. Thomas Bryant, Carol Bryant, gold lettering on thick cream paper, placed neatly on a table beside a trash can with a metal foot pedal. I just stood there, staring at their names. Then I turned and walked straight toward the bar. I found Elise, the wedding coordinator, reviewing something on her tablet. "Who changed the seating chart?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Mrs. Caldwell adjusted it this morning. She said the bride approved." I felt something drop in my chest. I never approved anything. For a moment, I just stood there in the middle of that perfect room, surrounded by flowers and candles and polished glass, and I did what I had trained myself to do in the ER. I assessed the situation. Table 16. Kitchen doors swinging open and closed, dishes clanging behind the wall, folding chairs, a trash can 2 feet from where my father would sit, at his daughter's wedding. If I said nothing, I knew exactly how this would play out. My parents would take those seats. They wouldn't complain. My dad would straighten his tie, the one he bought years ago, the only good one he owned. And he'd smile at me and say, "It's okay, sweetheart." My mom would sit quietly, folding her napkin in her lap, pretending she couldn't hear the noise from the kitchen just behind her. And Victoria would see it. She would see that she could move them anywhere she wanted, to the back of the room, to the edge of every event, out of sight. And no one would stop her. Every holiday after this, every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every future milestone, my parents would always be table 16, the ones who didn't quite belong. The ones you hide near the service entrance so your important guests don't have to notice them. I thought about my dad's hands. 35 years of hard work. Pipes, tools, repairs. Hands that could rebuild an entire bathroom in a single day. Hands that had saved for months just to buy the suit he was wearing today. I thought about my mom's dress. She made it herself, took an old one and transformed it. Added lace to the sleeves, replaced the zipper. I watched her spend 3 weekends bent over that sewing machine, squinting carefully. Pins between her lips. These were the people who raised me, who sacrificed for me, who drove through snowstorms so I wouldn't miss school. And someone decided they belonged next to a trash can. I turned and went to find Ethan. I thought he would fix it. I thought he would be furious for me. I thought he would see what I saw. I was wrong. Again. And I know some of you listening right now are thinking about your own parents. Maybe they worked overtime so you could have something better. Maybe they showed up to everything, no matter how far it was. If you've ever had someone look at your family like they weren't enough, type, "My family is enough" in the comments. Because what happened next is why I will never let anyone put my parents at table 16 again. I found Ethan in the groomsmen's suite. He was standing in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting his cufflinks. Silver, monogrammed, a gift from Victoria. "Who moved my parents from the head table?" I asked. He didn't even turn around. "Mom rearranged a few things this morning," he said casually. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. They don't have seats. "Ethan," I said, my voice tighter than I expected. "Table 16 has seats. Table 16 is next to the kitchen, next to the trash." He let out a slow breath. The kind of sigh people make when they think you're being unreasonable. "Kelly, we have 200 guests out there. Can we not do this right now?" When then I asked, after dinner, after they've already sat there for 3 hours, he finally turned to face me, calm, composed, patient. The kind of expression someone practices when they want to sound reasonable, while saying something that isn't. "Mom has her reasons," he said. "The Reynolds and the Harringtons are sitting at table 1. They're important. More important than my parents." He didn't say it out loud. He didn't need to. He stepped closer and placed his hand lightly on my arm. Soft, controlled, almost rehearsed. "Hey," he said quietly. "You're stressed. It's your wedding day. Let's just get through dinner." "Okay, I'll talk to my mom tomorrow." Tomorrow. That word again. Tomorrow after the engagement party. Tomorrow after the bridal shower. Tomorrow after every moment I tried to stand my ground. Tomorrow never came. I looked at his face, searching for something. Anger, guilt, surprise, anything that would tell me he hadn't known about this. There was nothing. No shock. No frustration. No confusion. He already knew. He knew my parents had been moved. He knew where they were sitting, and he still stood there adjusting his cufflinks like it didn't matter. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out. There was still one more thing I needed to see. On my way back through the corridor, I stopped at the welcome table near the entrance. A neat stack of programs sat beside the guest book, thick ivory paper with gold lettering. I picked one up and opened it. Page 2. With love and gratitude to our families. Below that, a list. Gregory and Victoria Caldwell. Charles and Margaret Caldwell. Daniel Caldwell. The Caldwell Family Foundation. 4 lines. All Caldwell. I flipped the page, checked the back, looked inside the fold. My parents weren't there. Not anywhere. In the original version, the one I approved 3 weeks earlier, my parents' names had been at the top. With deepest love to Thomas and Carol Bryant, whose sacrifices made all of this possible. I had written that myself. Victoria had seen it. She hadn't said a word. She didn't need to. She just waited until the morning of the wedding and had them removed. Not just from the seating chart, from the record. I stood there holding that program, feeling something shift inside me. If you think my husband's family did the right thing by pushing my parents to the back and treating them like they didn't belong, comment right. But if you don't support that kind of behavior, comment, not okay. I truly want to hear your perspective. Then I found Samantha near the bridesmaid's room. She was touching up her lipstick when she looked up and saw my face. She immediately set it down. What happened? I told her everything. The table, the program, Ethan's response, all of it. No pauses, no hesitation. 30 seconds straight. She didn't gasp, didn't interrupt, didn't tell me to calm down. She just listened. Then she closed the lipstick, slipped it into her clutch, and looked at me. What do you want to do? I don't know yet, I said. She nodded once. Okay. What do you need from me? Stay close. I'm here, she said. I'm right here. She didn't say I told you so. Even though she could have. She had warned me about the Caldwells 6 months ago. Gently. Once. And then she let it go. She respected my choices. Even the ones she didn't agree with. That's why I trusted her more than anyone else in that building. And in that moment, I still hadn't decided what I was going to do. But I knew whatever I heard next would decide everything. I turned and walked back toward the groomsmen's suite. I wasn't trying to listen in. I was going to give him one more chance. Stand in front of him. Look him in the eye. Say it clearly. Fix this. Or I don't walk into that room. The door was slightly open. Just a few inches. Enough. I stopped. Victoria's voice came first. Low. Controlled. Calm in the way it always was when she was being the most cutting. Ethan. Look at her father. That suit has to be at least 15 years old. And her mother, honestly. Did she make that dress herself? A quiet pause. They look poor. You cannot have them sitting at the front table. What will people think? Ethan answered. I know. Mom. The Reynolds are sitting right there. Mr. Harrington and his wife, too. These are the people who matter. Ethan, she said softly. Not. I'm sorry, but not a plumber and a cafeteria worker. Silence. Then his voice again. You're right. The Bryants are fine in the back. It's more appropriate. My hand pressed flat against the wall beside me. The hallway shifted slightly, like the ground wasn't as steady as it had been a second ago. Then Victoria again. Quieter now. You should have listened to me from the beginning. She doesn't belong here. A pause. She never did. I could hear my heartbeat. Slow, heavy, like something closing from the inside. My father, the man who spent decades on his knees fixing other people's homes. The man who drove hours just to visit me at college because he didn't trust cafeteria food to be enough. My mother, who made sure other people's children never went hungry. A plumber, a cafeteria worker. That's what they reduced them to. And the man I was about to marry said she was right. There are things you can't unhear. That was one of them. I stepped back from the door. My hands were no longer shaking. Everything inside me had gone still. The way it does in the ER right before everything changes. Quiet, clear, final. I pushed the door open. Victoria turned first. Her face froze for a fraction of a second. Then it rearranged itself into that same polished smile, the one that looked warm, but felt like a locked door. "Kelly, sweetheart," she said smoothly. "You look beautiful." I heard everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. Heard what he said quickly. "We were just talking. You said my dad looks poor," I said. My voice steady. "You said my mom made her dress like that was something to be embarrassed about. They don't belong at the front table." I held Ethan's gaze. What part of that did I misunderstand? Victoria stepped forward, hands clasped neatly in front of her. Posture perfect, composed like she was about to give a speech at one of her charity events. "Kelly, this is just a seating arrangement," she said smoothly. "We're trying to make sure everything runs appropriately. You called my father a plumber like it was something to be ashamed of." I said, "You called my mother a cafeteria worker like it made her less than you." "I didn't mean it that way," she replied quickly. "And you," I turned to Ethan. "You said they were fine in the back, that it was more appropriate." His expression didn't change. His voice dropped into that same calm, controlled tone he used in business meetings. "You're emotional right now. Kelly, it's your wedding day. Let's just take a breath." "I am breathing." "Ethan," I said quietly, and I have never been more clear. Victoria glanced at him. A sharp, quick look. "Handle this." Ethan tried again. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's not ruin the day over something small." "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "You already did." I turned and walked out. The hallway stretched in front of me. Long, quiet, polished wood beneath my heels. Behind me, I heard Victoria whisper something sharply to him, too low for me to make out. He didn't follow. He didn't call my name. He didn't come after me. And that told me everything I needed to know. I walked toward the reception hall, but I didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, I turned and went to find the only person in that entire building who had never once made me feel like I wasn't enough. Samantha was exactly where I had left her, leaning against the wall outside the bridesmaid's room, arms crossed, watching the hallway like she had been waiting for something to happen. She looked at my face. "Tell me." I told her everything, word for word. Victoria's voice, Ethan agreeing, the way they said plumber, the way they said cafeteria worker. She didn't interrupt, didn't react right away. She just listened. Then she was quiet for a few seconds. 5, maybe. Then she asked, "What are you thinking I'm thinking? I can't sign my name to this." She nodded once. No shock, no drama. Just focus. "Okay," she said. "Then here's what you need to know." She lowered her voice slightly. "The ceremony is done. But the marriage license, you haven't signed it yet." I looked at her. "Elise has it." She continued. "The plan was to do the signing after dinner, at the sweetheart table, during dessert." I remembered. Victoria had insisted on making it a moment, a performance. The bride and groom signing in front of everyone. "So legally," Samantha said carefully, You're not married yet. Not until that paper is signed, witnessed, and filed. I felt the words settle into place. The vows, the rings, the ceremony. None of it counted. Not yet. The only thing that makes this real, she said, is your signature. I exhaled slowly. How long do I have as long as you don't sign? She said. But once you walk back in there, once the speeches start, once Elise brings that license out. She met my eyes. The pressure is going to be intense. 200 people watching. Expecting you to sign. I know. And I did. I knew exactly what that room would demand from me. And I knew I was running out of time to decide. So, whatever you're going to do, Samantha said quietly, you need to decide before you sit down. She placed her hand on my arm. Firm. Steady. I'm your lawyer and your best friend, she added. In that order tonight. Whatever you choose, I'm right next to you. I nodded once. Then I turned and walked back into the reception hall. I found my parents at table 16. My dad was sitting exactly the way he always did when something wasn't right, but he refused to show it. Back straight, hands resting flat on his knees, his suit jacket buttoned, his tie perfectly aligned. He had polished his shoes that morning. I could tell from the faint, uneven shine that comes from drugstore polish and a kitchen rag. My mom sat beside him, gently smoothing a crease along her dress. She had tailored it herself, taken in the waist, added lace to the sleeves, replaced the zipper. 3 weekends of careful work. I remembered watching her sit at the sewing machine late at night, leaning forward, squinting at the thread. Pins held between her lips. Behind them, the kitchen door swung open with a loud bang. A wave of heat rushed out, dishes clattered, metal against metal. My mom flinched. My dad didn't move. Hey, sweetheart, he said when he saw me, smiling like nothing was wrong. You look beautiful. My throat tightened. Dad, I'm so sorry about don't, he said gently, lifting one hand. I can sit anywhere. Baby girl, this is your day. He paused, then added softly, it's our family's day. He looked at me a little longer than usual, and in his eyes, there was something quiet. Not anger, not disappointment. Understanding. Like he already knew what I hadn't said yet. I thought about the money. $12,000. Saved over 15 years. Little by little. From a plumber's paycheck. From a cafeteria worker's salary. That money paid for the catering. Every plate. Every glass. Every dessert sitting in that room tonight. Without it, there would be no dinner. And Victoria had seated the people who paid for it, next to the trash. Stay here, I said quietly. Both of you. I'll be right back. My mom reached for my hand. Kelly, don't make trouble because of us. I squeezed her fingers. I'm not making trouble. Mom, I said. I'm finishing it. The reception doors opened. Guests began to file in. 200 people, guided by the soft music of the string ensemble. Something classical drifting through the air like it belonged to a different world. I stood off to the side and watched. The Caldwell guests moved with ease, straight to the front tables, confident, comfortable, like they had always belonged there. My guests moved differently, slower, checking name cards, glancing around, pulling out chairs that didn't quite match the rest, settling into the edges of the room. And I stood there, watching exactly where everyone had been placed. The MC Brian, one of Ethan's college friends, stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the families of our beautiful couple. He turned toward table 1, the Caldwell family. 9 people stood. Victoria smiled like she owned the room. Gregory gave a polite wave. Charles and Margaret raised their glasses. Applause filled the space. Brian glanced briefly at his card, then continued. And now, let's raise a glass to love. That was it. No mention of the Bryants, not a single word. From across the room, I saw Patricia, my charge nurse, the woman who trained me when I first started in the ER. She walked toward table 16 carrying a plate of appetizers. She stopped when she reached my parents. Her eyes moved slowly. The folding chairs, the kitchen door. My father. She set the plate down. Then she turned and walked straight toward me. "Kelly," she said, her voice low and steady, the same tone she used when something was going very wrong. "Why are your parents sitting next to the service entrance? I'm handling it," I said quietly. "That man fixed the plumbing in my house for half the price when everything flooded last winter." She said, "He wouldn't even take a tip." "I know." She looked past me, toward the back of the room. "Then why is he sitting next to a trash can at his daughter's wedding at table 1? I noticed Gregory's business partner, Mr. Reynolds, lean toward his wife and say something under his breath. She turned, looked toward table 16, then back at him with a frown. People were starting to notice. The illusion was cracking. The first course was served. Butternut squash soup, poured into white porcelain bowls, decorated with tiny green herbs, my parents' $12,000, plated and presented like fine dining. Victoria stood from table 1 and walked toward the bar. Her friend, Eleanor, walked beside her. Their path took them directly past table 16. I stood near the dessert table. Not far away. Close enough. Close enough to hear. My mom was adjusting the lace on her sleeve. The stitching had come loose. A thin thread hung from the cuff. She was trying to tuck it in quietly, carefully, like she didn't want anyone to notice. Victoria slowed. She looked at my mother's sleeve, then turned slightly toward Eleanor. "Bless her heart," she said softly. "Someone really should have bought her a proper dress." She took a sip of champagne, then added, almost lightly, "But I suppose people should know their place." She said it with a smile, soft enough to seem private, clear enough for it to carry. My mother's hands froze. The thread slipped from her fingers. Her eyes dropped to the table. My father reached under the tablecloth and took her hand. He didn't say anything. He just held it. I have seen a lot in my life. I have watched people die. I have stood in rooms where families heard the worst news they would ever receive. I have seen pain that doesn't leave, but nothing I had ever witnessed compared to that moment. My father, the strongest man I have ever known, sitting there, silent, absorbing that kind of disrespect, holding my mother's hand, next to a trash can. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in him I had never seen before. Shame. Not because of who he was, but because of where he had been placed. Because he couldn't fix it. And that was the moment something inside me broke. Completely. Irreversibly. I walked straight across the room, found Ethan near the edge of the dance floor, grabbed his arm and pulled him behind one of the columns. Out of earshot. "Your mother just humiliated mine in front of everyone," I said. "What did she say?" he asked, already tense. "Know your place. Someone should have bought her a proper dress." He ran a hand through his hair. "Kelly, don't," I said. "She meant every word, and you know it." He exhaled slowly. "Can we please just get through dinner?" I stared at him. "Go over there," I said quietly. "Go tell your mother to apologize." I said, "Right now." Ethan looked at me, then passed me toward Victoria laughing near the bar, toward table 1, toward the world he was choosing. He took it all in, then looked back. "I'm not making a scene. Kelly, 200 people are watching. Then don't. I whispered. I don't care how. Just fix it. He adjusted his jacket, took a breath, and said the sentence that ended everything. Your parents will be fine. They're strong. Let's just get through tonight. That was it. He walked away, back to table 1. Victoria leaned in, touched his arm. He lifted his glass, and I stood there alone. The music swelled. Servers passed with plated salmon, my parents' $12,000 on porcelain. Laughter rose. Glasses clinked. A perfect room where my parents didn't have a seat that honored them. Ethan had chosen the table, the room, his mother. So I made mine. I walked to table 16 and sat between my parents. Not at the sweetheart table. Not beside the man I was supposed to marry. My mom blinked. Confused. Kelly. Honey. You should be up front. My family is here. I said. So I'm here. My dad studied my face. He knew that look. Don't do anything because of us. He said quietly. I'm not. I answered. I'm doing this for me. Across the room. Samantha was already watching. I gave her a small nod. She stood. I breathed once, twice, then pushed my chair back. The walk to the stage was short, 60 feet, but every step landed like a decision. My heels clicked against the floor, sharp, steady, counting down. Heads turned. Conversation softened, then thinned, then faded. By the time I reached the stage, the room was almost silent. Brian faltered mid-story. Oh, the bride. A few scattered claps. I took the microphone. He let go. I faced the room. 200 faces. Crystal. Linen. Gold. Victoria at table 1. Ethan beside her. Gregory staring down. And behind me, my parents. Table 16. Victoria leaned toward Ethan. I couldn't hear her, but I could read it. What is she doing? I adjusted the mic. Thank you all for being here today. My voice was clear. Level. No tremor. Years in the ER had taught me how to stay steady when everything was breaking. I know you came to celebrate a wedding. I said, and I owe you the truth about what's happening in this room. The last whisper died. Stillness settled. Most of you know me as Ethan Caldwell's fiancé. I paused. But before that, and after tonight, I am Thomas and Carol Bryant's daughter. I lifted my hand and pointed toward the back of the room. My parents are sitting at table 16. I said, I'd like everyone to take a moment and look at table 16. Heads turned. All of them. 200 people shifting in unison, eyes moving past the bar, past the dessert table, past the soft glow of the candles, to the far corner, to where my parents sat. At a folding table, between a service cart and a trash bin. I watched the reactions move across the room like a storm rolling in. Confusion first, then recognition, then something heavier. Understanding. Mr. Reynolds slowly set his fork down. His wife lifted her hand to her mouth. Patricia, standing near the wall, closed her eyes for a second and shook her head. At table 1. Victoria's smile froze, hardened. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. Ethan sat beside her, jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. 12 hours ago. I continued, my voice steady. My parents were seated at table 1, right here, where the families of the bride and groom are supposed to sit. I let the words hang. That was the seating arrangement I approved. Silence. This morning. That changed. I looked across the room. This morning, someone came into this room and replaced every place card at the head table. My parents were removed and reassigned to the last table in the room. I paused. Next to the kitchen, next to the service entrance, next to the trash. The room stayed still. That person, I said, turning my gaze directly toward the table one. Was Victoria Caldwell? Every head at that table turned toward her. Victoria didn't move. Her chin lifted slightly, but the color had drained from her face. Her fingers had gone white around the glass. Gregory stared down at the tablecloth, unmoving. When I confronted my fiancé, I continued, and told him what his mother had done. He told me not to make a scene. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. And when I heard him speak to her privately, he said, and these are his exact words. I looked straight at Ethan. They're fine in the back. The Reynolds and the Harringtons are more important. A chair shifted. Mr. Reynolds leaned back slightly, putting space between himself and the Caldwells. His wife looked at Ethan with a kind of expression I recognized instantly. The look people have when they realize something isn't right, when they understand they've been standing too close to something they shouldn't trust. Ethan stood up abruptly. Kelly, that's not sit down. Ethan, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You had your chance to stand up for my family. I said. You chose not to. He stood there for a moment. Then Victoria reached out, touched his sleeve, and slowly, he sat back down. The room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen door creak behind me. From somewhere in the back, my Aunt Denise whispered softly, "Tell them, baby." I took a breath. Then I turned slightly, just enough to see my father in the corner of my vision. He was sitting straight, hands resting on the table, looking at me. My father, I said. Thomas Bryant has worked as a plumber for 35 years. I swallowed once. He has 2 bad knees and 1 good suit. The one he's wearing today. He saved for months to buy it. At one of the tables, a woman lifted a napkin to her eyes. My mother, Carol Bryant, serves lunch to hundreds of children every single day. She knows their names, their allergies, which ones go hungry at home. I paused. She makes sure those kids never leave without something extra. I turned back toward the front. My parents contributed $12,000 to this wedding. I let that number settle into the room. They saved that money over 15 years. I glanced at the tables. People were looking at their plates now, at their glasses, at the food in front of them. Every plate you're eating tonight, I said quietly, was paid for by them. Then I looked directly at Victoria. And you seated them next to the garbage. The reaction broke the silence. A sharp intake of breath from one table, someone shifting abruptly in their chair. Eleanor slowly set her glass down and leaned away from Victoria. From the back of the room, someone stood. Then Patricia. Then my aunt. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, like witnesses. Victoria opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Ethan stared down at his plate. Gregory still didn't move. I came here today to start a marriage, I said. A partnership. A life built on mutual respect. My voice stayed steady, unshaken. I came here believing I was choosing a family. I held my voice steady. I wouldn't let it break. Not here, not in front of her, but I cannot sign my name to a marriage where my family is treated like something to be ashamed of. I said, I will not raise children who grow up believing that love means hiding where you come from. I reached up slowly and removed my veil, unpinned it carefully, folded it once, then again, then a third time. I placed it on the edge of the stage the way my mother had taught me to fold things, neatly, with care, even when you're letting go. I looked out at the room, to those of you who came here from my side, from Maple Street, from the clinic, from the places that raised me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for standing with my family. I paused. We're going home. Then I turned my eyes back to Victoria. One last time, to the Caldwells. I said quietly. I truly wish you well. But I deserve better than a man who stays silent while his mother calls my father poor. And my parents deserve better than table 16. I placed the microphone back onto the stand, gently. No drop, no noise. Just set it down the way you set down something when the job is done. Then I stepped off the stage and started walking, back across the room. My heels struck the floor in that same steady rhythm, measured, clear. This time, no one spoke over it. No music, no laughter, just silence. My dad stood up as I reached the table. My mom was crying, quietly, the way she always did when she didn't want anyone to notice. I wrapped my arms around both of them right there, between the folding chairs, between the kitchen door and everything that had just happened. Samantha appeared beside us with my coat and my bag. She had already called a car. Of course she had. The four of us walked out together, past the dessert table, past the musicians, who had stopped playing, past 200 people who didn't say a word. Behind us, I heard Victoria's voice. Sharp, brittle. She's lost her mind. And then, Ethan. Kelly. Wait, I didn't turn around. I didn't slow down. The door closed behind us, and the last thing I heard was my own breathing. If you're still listening, then you already understand why I did it, but I want to hear from you. Has anyone ever made you feel like your family wasn't enough? Like the people who raised you didn't belong? If you know that feeling, type "not table 16" in the comments. And if this story touched something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because what happened after I walked out, that's where everything really began. That night, I sat at the kitchen table in my parents' house, the same table I had done homework on since I was a kid. Formica top, chrome legs, a small chip on the corner from the time I dropped a cast iron pan in high school. My mom stood at the counter making coffee. My dad sat across from me, quiet. That was how he spoke when things mattered most. At 9:15, Samantha called. The marriage license is still unsigned, she said. I confirmed with Elise. It was never signed, never witnessed, never filed. I closed my eyes for a second. So legally. She continued. You were never married, not even for a moment. No annulment, no divorce, nothing to untangle. You walked away clean. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside my chest loosen. There's more, she added. Since you live together, he might try to claim shared assets. But your lease is in your name. Your accounts are separate. You're in a strong position. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. One last thing. He's been calling. 17 missed calls from Ethan. 3 from Victoria. 1 from Gregory. I blocked them. I said, Good, she replied. After the call ended, the house went quiet again. My dad had gone to bed. My mom stood at the sink, washing mugs by hand even though the dishwasher was empty. She always did that when she was worried. My phone stayed silent. No more messages. No more apologies mixed with blame. I didn't need him to say sorry. I needed him to stand up 6 hours earlier and say, That's my wife's family. Put them back where they belong. He didn't, and I couldn't forget what I heard. My mom dried the last mug, placed it in the cabinet, then kissed the top of my head. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Your dad is too. He just doesn't say it well. 2 weeks later, I got sick. Once in the morning, again at noon, again in the afternoon. I drove to the pharmacy on Route 17, the same one I'd gone to since I was a kid. The pharmacist recognized me, saw what I was holding, and didn't ask a single question. She just rang it up and handed me the bag. I took the test in the bathroom at my parents' house. 2 lines. Clear. Unmistakable. I sat on the floor and cried. Not from joy, not from excitement, but because everything had just become more complicated. I was going to be a mother, and the father was the man I had walked away from in front of 200 people. The question came quickly. Do I tell him? The answer came even faster. Yes, this child deserved both parents. But telling him didn't mean going back, didn't mean changing my decision, didn't mean giving up my dignity for something that was already broken. My mom found me about an hour later. She came in for towels, saw the test on the counter, and froze. Then she slowly sat down beside me on the cold tile. She didn't ask anything. She just wrapped her arm around me. You're not alone, she said. You've never been alone. I know. I whispered. Dad's going to lose his mind. She smiled faintly. In the good way. I almost laughed. Everything was harder now. But harder didn't mean wrong. And being alone didn't mean I was defeated. Not when I had a mother who would sit on a bathroom floor beside me without being asked. I told Ethan by email. Samantha reviewed every word before I sent it. 3 sentences. Clear, professional, final. I'm pregnant. I'm keeping the baby. If you want parental rights. All communication goes through legal counsel. His responses came in waves. The first email said, Come home. Kelly. We'll raise this baby together. We can fix this. The second came 4 hours later. My family will fight for custody. You have no idea what you're up against. The third arrived just before midnight. You're making the biggest mistake of your life. 3 emails. 3 completely different tones. Pleading, threatening, warning. All from the same man who couldn't stand up to his mother over a seating chart. Then Victoria called. She used a different number. I had already blocked hers. So she called the house. My dad answered. I stood in the doorway, listening. Mr. Bryant, she said, her voice perfectly composed. I trust you understand that this child is a Caldwell. We have the best attorneys in the county. My dad looked over at me. I nodded once. Mrs. Caldwell, he said calmly. My daughter has a lawyer. You can speak to her. Then he hung up. No anger, no raised voice, just a decision. He set the phone down and went back to his coffee. That week, Samantha connected me with one of her colleagues, a custody attorney named Hannah Wells in Chicago. Hannah was direct. The court prioritizes the primary caregiver. She told me, you have stable work, family support, and no instability. Their money doesn't decide custody. I filed everything properly. No arguments, no emotional back and forth, just paperwork, deadlines, boundaries. Victoria said they had the best lawyers. Maybe they did. But she didn't expect one thing. A woman who stopped being afraid of her. Everything that followed happened quietly. No headlines, no public drama, just consequences. Slow, steady, unavoidable. The Monday after the wedding. Gregory's business partner called him. I didn't hear it directly. I heard it later. Through Samantha. Through Hannah. Through someone whose husband played golf with him. I've been thinking about the Oak Ridge project, the partner said. I'm not comfortable moving forward. What does a wedding have to do with business? Gregory asked. If that's how your family treats its own, the man replied. I have to wonder how you'd treat a partner when things go wrong. He pulled out. The project stalled. Investors hesitated. Things shifted. A few weeks later, the Bright Future Foundation board met privately. Victoria had chaired their annual gala for years, raised more money than anyone before her. But donors started asking questions. Members started feeling uneasy. She wasn't fired. That's not how it works in those circles. She was asked to step back, to focus on family. The gala went on without her name attached. I didn't cause any of it. I didn't call anyone. Didn't post anything. Didn't tell the story outside of my parents and Samantha. I didn't need to. 200 people saw what happened that night. And 200 people talked. Consequences don't always come with confrontation. Sometimes they come quietly, in phone calls, in decisions, in doors that stop opening. About a month after the wedding, Ethan showed up at my parents' house. I was upstairs when I heard the knock. Then the creak of the screen door. Then my dad's voice. Ethan, Mr. Bryant. I came to apologize. I was hoping to talk to Kelly. She told you to go through the lawyers. I know what she said. He replied. But I want to say this in person. I should have handled things differently. I should have stood up for your family. I moved toward the window and looked down. I could see them. My dad standing in the doorway. Ethan on the walkway. One step lower. Looking up. Waiting. My dad stood on the porch. Arms relaxed at his sides. Ethan stood on the walkway below. Looking up at him. You should have. My dad said simply. Ethan swallowed. Can I see her? Just 5 minutes. My dad didn't move, didn't shift, didn't cross his arms. He just stood there, filling the doorway the same way he had my entire life. Solid, steady, unmovable. My daughter made herself clear. He said, if you want to be part of this child's life, Hannah Wells has the paperwork. That's the path. Ethan's face tightened. For a brief second, the calm mask slipped. Not regret. Frustration. The kind that comes from someone who isn't used to hearing no. You're going to regret this, he said. My family won't let this go. My dad looked at him for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. I'm not keeping anyone out. Son, I'm keeping the door. Then he stepped back inside. Closed it. Not loudly. Just a quiet click. Final. From upstairs. I watched Ethan stand there for a few seconds, staring at the door. Then he turned, got into his car, and drove away. My dad never mentioned it. That night at dinner, he passed me the potatoes and asked how work had been. 5 months. That's how long it took to build something new from what was left behind. I found a small apartment 3 blocks away. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, $850 a month. Beige carpet, 1 narrow kitchen counter. A bathroom fan that sounded like it was about to take off. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My mom showed up the first day with a measuring tape. By the end of the week, every window had curtains. Blue for the kitchen, white for the bedroom, soft yellow for the room that would become the nursery. My dad came over that Saturday with his toolbox, fixed the faucet, replaced the shower head, reinforced the closet rod. Then he spent hours in the nursery, building a small wooden shelf from old reclaimed boards. He carved a shallow groove along the top. No name yet. He said, but we'll need a place for it. During my last trimester, I cut back my hours at the clinic. Patricia rearranged the schedule without me even asking. You covered for me when I had surgery. She said, this is nothing. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. Not because I regretted leaving, I never did. But because doing this alone is harder than anyone tells you. The cramps at 2 in the morning with no one beside you. The ultrasound appointments where they ask if the father is coming. The baby shower in my parents' living room where 1 chair stayed empty. I chose this. And I would choose it again. But choosing what's right doesn't make it easy. Single motherhood isn't a punishment, but it isn't easy either. It's just life. And I was living it. My daughter was born on a Tuesday morning. 6:14 a.m. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, 10 tiny fingers, brown eyes, and a cry that filled the entire room. Bryant. I gave her my name. I gave her my name. My parents' name. The name of a plumber and a cafeteria worker who never made their daughter feel small. My dad held her like she was something fragile and priceless. My mom took dozens of photos. 2 weeks later, a letter came from Gregory Caldwell. He apologized not for what they did, but for staying silent. I read it, put it away, and never replied. I was done choosing hope over truth. A year later, my daughter is 1. I'm back at work, promoted, building a life that's simple but mine. My apartment is still small, but the walls are full of memories. Ethan sees her twice a month. We speak only through an app. His mother has never met her. Not because I lock the door, but because she refuses to step through it with respect. Every Sunday, we gather at my parents' table. No luxury, no perfection, just people who choose to be there. My dad holds my daughter and tells her he used to fix pipes. Now he just fixes things for her. No one sits in the back. No one sits near the trash. This is my table 1. Looking back, I realize the hardest decision I made that day wasn't walking away from a wedding. It was choosing dignity over comfort, truth over silence, and my family over a future that would have slowly erased who I am. I learned that love without respect is not love, it's convenience. And the moment someone asks you to feel ashamed of where you come from, that's the moment you need to stand up, not shrink. I chose to leave, to protect my parents' worth, and to build a life where my child would never question her place at the table. But I want to ask you something honestly. If you were in my position standing in that room, watching your family being treated like they didn't belong, would you have done the same? If your answer is yes, type yes in the comments, so I know I wasn't alone in that choice. If you would have stayed, tried to fix things quietly, type no. And if you're still thinking, still torn between heart and reason, type maybe. There's no perfect answer, only the one you can live with. If this story meant something to you, don't just watch and move on. Be part of a community that values courage, family, and self-respect. A simple like, a comment, or a subscription doesn't just support this channel, it helps stories like this reach someone who might need the strength to choose themselves. And maybe, together, we remind each other that no one deserves to sit at table 16 in their own life.
Welcome to Family Confessions. Our stories go beyond entertainment, helping viewers recognize toxic behaviors, understand boundaries, and reflect on their relationships, while reinforcing self-worth and the strength to heal and move forward. Each video follows a structured workflow ensuring quality and value for our audience. Thank you for being here.